and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Em.
I'm Sam.
For 2 years, a pack of Strepzils cost $5.50 at Kohl's. Then suddenly, it was $7. Then just as suddenly, it was on sale for $6, with a big down discount tag. The ACCC examined that sequence of events and is now alleging that Kohl's is not offering discounts, but rather engaging in deceptive conduct in relation to a group of at least 245 items. Yesterday, the consumer watchdog began its case against Kohl's in Australia's federal court. And on today's pod, we're going to take a closer look at the hearing that could reshape supermarket pricing in Australia.
I always find these stories really interesting because it kind of gets at the heart of something that most of us do at least once a week, if not a little bit more, supermarket shopping. And there's not a huge amount of choice in Australia, which is something I want to ask you about a bit later. But before we get into the specifics of what's being alleged this week, give me some context about Kohl's and why the ACCC is going after them.
Sure. So Kohl's and Woolworths together control about 2/3 of Australia's supermarket sector.
Right, so quite a chunk.
Yes, a big chunk. We're talking about massive companies here too. In the 2025 to 2026 financial year, Kohl's reported profits of $1.1 billion. Right,
so a good year to be a shareholder of the supermarket.
Yes, but I think that's almost every year for these companies.
Right.
Back in September 2024, the ACCC announced it was launching separate lawsuits against Kohl's and Woolworths. The Kohl's trial started yesterday, which is why we're talking about it today, and the Woolworths trial will happen later this year in April and May. The ACCC analysed the prices of hundreds of Kohl's grocery items over about 15 months, from February 2022 to May 2023. They're now accusing Kohl's of using misleading pricing across 245 products.
So the ACCC, Australia's competition and consumer watchdog, they're kind of there to make sure that consumers like you and I are getting a fair deal when it comes to people or companies trying to sell us stuff.
Yes.
But putting prices up itself might not necessarily be illegal. So what exactly is the ACCC claiming here that Kohl's did?
So the accusation centres on Kohl's down promotion. If you've shopped at Kohl's, you've probably seen these tags. You've probably heard the slogan, down, prices are down.
Yeah, a big hand.
Yeah, the big red hand pointing down. They've been running that campaign since 2010, and they're meant to advertise sustained price reductions rather than just short-term sales.
Right.
The tags show you the previous price, and then they show you the new, supposedly lower price. The ACCC says Kohl's use these tags to mislead customers through a practice called price spiking.
Price spiking.
Yes, here's how that works. So a product would be sold at one price for a while. Then Kohl's would briefly increase the price. Then they'd slap a down, prices are down tag on it, advertising it as discounted. But that discounted price is actually higher than the same original price.
Okay, and at the top of the pod, you spoke about Strepzils. You know, you're the go-to if you got a sore throat.
Yes,
but
of course.
It turns out that might have led to a bit more pain in the hip pocket. Talk me through that Strepsils example, because I think it captures what you're talking about here really well.
Definitely. So that was one of the 245 items I mentioned earlier. And the ACCC used Strepsils honey and lemon lozenges as an example. So Kohl's sold these for $5.50 for 2 years. Then, in October 2022, they increased the price to $7. The next month, November, the Strepsils were advertised as down to $6 with a discount label. So customers are seeing this discount tag, they think that they're getting a deal, but that $6 price is actually 50 cents more than what they had been paying for the previous 2 years. And the ACCC says that this happened across a further 244 products at least, and that included things like butter, deodorant, paper towels, the list goes on.
And in this scenario, has Strepsils done anything wrong? Like, is the ACCC also saying that Strepsils need to be accountable for this? Or
No.
the parent company of Strepsils?
No, so these products are all set by the supermarket.
Right,
so the
okay.
supplier provides an RRP, a recommended retail price, and then the supermarkets can do theoretically what they want with that price to make a profit.
Okay, so the heart of this case is about really Kohl's and Kohl's alone misled customers about what actually constitutes a discount, right?
Hi, I'm Emma from TDA. I'm over here working on our next podcast episode. And while I do that, can you please subscribe to our YouTube channel? Please. Now back to today's deep dive.
Exactly. And the ACCC defines a misleading pricing practice as a situation where a sale price is advertised as discounted when an item hasn't been sold at the original price for a reasonable period before it goes on sale.
Oh, interesting.
So part of this trial will be determining what is considered a reasonable period.
Right.
Yeah,
whether that means kind of weeks or months.
Yes, exactly. And that's going to be a key question in this trial.
So it's a trial where Coles can come and explain, I assume, that they haven't done the wrong thing and instead give a justified explanation for their pricing practices. Give me a sense of what Coles' defense is going to look like.
Sure. So they are denying all of the allegations, as you assumed. And their defense is centered around two main arguments. So firstly, they're pointing to supplier costs, so the cost of the product for them increasing. And secondly, they're saying that those 245 products were temporarily removed from the down promotion.
Okay.
In a November 2024 response, Coles lawyers said that the affected products were sold at the non-promotional price for up to 6 weeks before they re-entered that down pricing program. So they're essentially arguing that there was a gap between when the product went off sale and went back on sale. Therefore, it was not misleading.
So I feel like a lot of this trial is going to be about what that reasonable period actually looks like, and probably you'd assume lead to some sort of position that the judges will take as to what is reasonable for consumers.
Exactly.
But we can't look at this in a vacuum. This isn't the only scrutiny the supermarkets have faced in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's right. So there's been quite a lot going on. And in 2025, in March, the ACCC released its findings from a separate year-long inquiry into the supermarket sector. And this painted a pretty stark image of what the Australian supermarket pricing scheme sort of looks like. And this report found that Coles and Woolworths were some of the world's most profitable grocery retailers. And when you control 2/3 of the market between you, you can see that that's pretty significant.
I remember in that ACCC report, the ACCC described both Coles and Woolworths as operating in an oligopoly. Explain what that structure looks like.
Sure. So an oligopoly is basically when a market is dominated by a small number of large players, which mean that there's very little competition.
Right.
Think about it this way. So when you go grocery shopping, unless you live near an Aldi or an IGA, a Foodworks, an independent grocer, you're probably choosing between Coles and Woolworths.
Yeah.
And that's very different to, say, the US or the UK, where they've got 5 or 6 major players in the supermarket world. And all of them are competing for your business rather than just 2. When there's less competition, those dominant players have more power to set the prices. So they don't have to worry as much about other companies undercutting them, like they might in the UK or the US.
And I know another part of what the ACCC are looking at over a number of years is whether, in fact, the two supermarket giants have worked together, and those allegations are still out there yet to be proven in court.
Yeah.
So we've got Coles on trial at the moment, then we've got Woolworths, you said, in a couple of months. What happens now in this trial?
So this trial is expected to run for the next 10 days, and Coles will have an opportunity to go through what I assume will be a very extensive case denying these allegations.
Right.
So if this ruling falls in the ACCC's favour and they prove that Coles is using these unethical, illusory pricing strategies, then they will seek significant cost penalties and mandatory community service from Coles.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, specifically they want the supermarket to fund a registered charity providing food and meals. This case will also then set a precedent for the upcoming trial against Woolworths.
True. I'm sure that Woolworths are watching this very closely.
Exactly, and they're up in April and May. So both supermarkets and shoppers will be watching this, as you said, very closely.
Well, a 10-day trial isn't that long, so I expect that you'll probably be kind of watching that closely and writing a piece, telling us exactly what happens right at the end of it. And thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Daily Aus this morning. A really great chat about the world of supermarket prices. This is the type of story that we cover in TDA Finance, actually, and I'll throw a link to that newsletter in the show notes for you. That drops every Wednesday morning in your inbox. I'm going to work on that today at work. We'll be back in your ears for the evening headlines in a couple of hours. Until then, have a beautiful day.